Crawford, your mother's condition is critical. We need to operate immediately. The doctor's voice echoed through the sterile hospital corridor. I gripped my phone tighter, trying to reach Douglas for the 6th time. When he finally answered, his irritation was palpable. What is it now, Virginia? I'm in an important meeting, he snapped, the familiar coldness in his voice making my stomach clench. Mom's being rushed into emergency surgery. I need you here, I pleaded, my voice cracking. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I waited for his response. Sorry, can't make it. Big things happening. Just handle it yourself, he replied before hanging up. I'm Virginia Crawford, 47 years old, and that moment in St. Luke's Hospital in Birmingham was when I finally admitted to myself that my marriage was beyond saving. As I watched the nurses wheel my mother toward the ICU, memories of happier times flooded back. Summer afternoons in our family's Victorian estate, the scent of mother's roses wafting through open windows, father's warm laughter echoing through the ornate halls. That estate had been in our family for 4 generations. After father passed 3 years ago, mother and I inherited it together. The old house meant everything to us. Every creaking floorboard, every intricate molding told our family's story. Douglas used to understand that, or at least I thought he did. When we first married 15 years ago, he would spend weekends helping mother tend to her beloved garden. But somewhere along the way, my husband's heart turned as cold as marble. As I sat in the ICU waiting room, my phone buzzed with a text from Douglas. Secured my future. Just sold the estate. Leaving for Brazil tonight with someone who actually makes me happy. Goodbye. A strange calm washed over me as I read his message. What Douglas didn't know was that I had been watching his every move for months. My private investigator had kept me well informed of his schemes, including his affair with his young secretary and their plans to flee the country. I typed back a single word. Fascinating. Looking at my mother's fragile form through the ICU window, I felt a fierce determination rise within me. Douglas had no idea what was coming. Sometimes the best revenge is letting someone walk straight into the trap they set for themselves. Douglas wasn't always this way. When we first met at a charity gala in Birmingham 15 years ago, he was different, kind, ambitious, and genuinely caring. He worked as a junior partner at a law firm then, and his eyes would light up when he talked about helping his clients. I remember how he used to bring coffee to my father during long discussions about estate management, eager to learn and understand our family's legacy. The Victorian estate had been more than just a home to us. Built in 1887 by my great-grandfather, it stood as a testament to our family's history. Every Christmas, every celebration, every quiet Sunday afternoon was spent within those walls. I can still picture my grandmother sitting in her favorite corner of the library, telling me stories about the generations before us. Family isn't just about blood, Virginia, she would say, her eyes twinkling with wisdom. It's about trust and protecting what matters most. The changes in Douglas were subtle at first. About 5 years ago, he started spending more time at the office, coming home later and later. When my father passed away 3 years ago, something shifted in him completely. He began questioning every financial decision I made, insisting on having more control over the estate's affairs. I noticed small things missing from the house: antique pieces, family jewelry, items he claimed were just being appraised. 2 months ago, I found receipts for a luxury condo in Rio de Janeiro in his email. That's when I hired Juliana, the private investigator. Your husband's been meeting with various potential buyers, she reported last week. He's been showing them forged documents claiming full ownership of the estate. The irony of it all would have made me laugh if it weren't so painful. Douglas had spent years trying to gain control of the estate, not knowing that my grandmother had placed it in an irrevocable trust long before he entered our lives. She had seen similar situations unfold in other wealthy families and had taken steps to protect our legacy. My phone buzzed again with another message from Douglas. You'll thank me when you see how much I got for that old house. Time to move on. I tucked the phone away, my hand finding comfort in the worn leather of my grandmother's diary and my purse. Inside lay the truth that would soon shatter Douglas's plans completely. The ICU waiting room felt colder as night fell. My mother's surgery was taking longer than expected, and my nerves were fraying. That's when Juliana, my private investigator, called with news that made my blood run cold. "Virginia, I have something you need to see right away," she said, her voice urgent. "Can you check your email?" I opened the attachment she sent and my hands started shaking. There were dozens of photos. Douglas at expensive restaurants with his young secretary, Angela, shopping for jewelry at Tiffany's, and visiting high-end real estate offices. But what made my stomach lurch were the documents clearly visible in some of the photos. "He's been systematically emptying your personal accounts for months," Juliana explained. "The estate sale is just the final piece. He's already transferred most of your liquid assets to offshore accounts." I pulled up my banking app, and sure enough, my personal account showed a balance of just $842. The joint account we shared was completely empty. Tears stung my eyes as I realized he'd been planning this for months, maybe years. My phone buzzed with another text from Douglas. "By the way, I took care of those dusty old photo albums in the library. Nobody needs that sentimental junk anymore. The buyers want the house empty by next week." The photo albums. My mother's precious memories, generations of our family history. I felt physically ill. The security camera feed from the estate popped up on my phone, showing Douglas and Angela loading boxes into his car. They were laughing, champagne glasses in hand, celebrating in our family home while my mother fought for her life in surgery. "Virginia," Juliana's voice brought me back to reality. "There's more. He's booked 2 first-class tickets to Rio de Janeiro for tonight. And he's been recording your phone calls with the hospital. He wanted to make sure your mother was too ill to interfere with the sale." The full weight of his betrayal crashed over me. He hadn't just been stealing our money. He'd been waiting for my mother to be at her most vulnerable. He'd timed everything perfectly, thinking I would be too distraught about my mother to notice what he was doing. The doctor appeared in the doorway just then. "Mrs. Crawford, your mother is stable. The surgery was successful, but she'll need extensive care during recovery." I clutched my grandmother's diary tighter, feeling the hidden documents inside that would be Douglas's undoing. He thought he had planned everything perfectly, but he had no idea what was coming. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just about winning. It's about letting your enemy lose everything on their own terms. "Mr. Reynolds, this is Virginia Crawford. I understand you're the buyer Douglas arranged for our estate?" My voice was steady, masking the anger churning inside me. "Ah, yes, Mrs. Crawford. Your husband mentioned you'd be calling to finalize the details. I must say $3.2 million is a steal for such a beautiful property." He sounded pleased with himself. "And you've already transferred the funds?" I asked, watching my mother's peaceful, sleeping face. "Yes, just this morning. Your husband was quite insistent on immediate payment. Said something about an investment opportunity in Brazil that couldn't wait." I smiled grimly. "Mr. Reynolds, I suggest you contact your bank immediately and stop that transfer. You see, Douglas doesn't actually have the authority to sell the estate." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry, what?" "The property is in an irrevocable trust. Any sale without proper documentation from the trust administrator is fraudulent." I heard him inhale sharply. "I believe that would make you an unwitting participant in real estate fraud." While Mr. Reynolds processed this information, my phone buzzed with another text from Douglas. "Just dropped off the final paperwork with the buyers. You should be grateful. I got us a great deal. Heading to the airport now with my real future." I turned my attention back to Mr. Reynolds, who was now sputtering about legal documentation. "Check your purchase agreement carefully," I advised. "I'm sure you'll find some irregularities. My husband can be creative with paperwork when it suits him." Just then, Juliana slipped into the hospital room, nodding to confirm that everything was in place. She handed me a folder containing copies of the trust documents and recent bank statements showing Douglas's systematic theft. "Mrs. Crawford," Mr. Reynolds's voice had taken on a panicked edge. "I've just reviewed the documentation. These signatures, they don't match the county records." "No, they wouldn't," I replied calmly. "I suggest you contact your lawyer immediately. The FBI is already involved, and they'll want to speak with you about your role in this transaction." As if on cue, my phone lit up with a call from Agent Sarah Martinez, who had been building a case against Douglas for the past month. "We're in position at the airport," she reported. "Your husband just checked in for his flight to Rio with a woman matching Angela's description." "Perfect timing," I said, watching Juliana set up her laptop to monitor the security feeds. "He has no idea the trust administrator is waiting at the gate." The next text from Douglas made me shake my head. "Boarding soon. You'll never find us where we're going. Enjoy your empty life in that worthless old house." I didn't bother responding. Instead, I opened my grandmother's diary and pulled out the document that would seal Douglas's fate, the original trust agreement, with its crystal-clear provisions about property transfer and fraud prevention. Juliana looked up from her laptop with a satisfied smile. "Airport security just flagged their passports. Want to watch the show?" Juliana's laptop screen showed the airport security feed as Douglas and Angela approached the international terminal. They looked confident, almost smug, pulling their expensive matching luggage. I noticed Angela wearing my mother's sapphire necklace, a family heirloom passed down for generations. "Mrs. Crawford," Agent Martinez's voice crackled through my phone, "we've discovered something disturbing. Your husband didn't just forge documents for the estate sale. He's been running a complex scheme involving multiple properties and elderly victims." My hand gripped the hospital bed rail as she continued. "We've identified at least 6 other cases where he targeted wealthy families during medical emergencies. He would forge power of attorney documents while they were hospitalized." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. All those late nights at the office, the mysterious client meetings, he'd been perfecting his scheme for years. I thought of the other families, other homes, other lives he'd tried to destroy. "There's more," Juliana interjected, her eyes fixed on her screen. "I've traced the money trail. Angela isn't just his mistress. She's been his accomplice from the beginning. She works for a shell company that's been laundering money from these property scams." On the security feed, I watched as Douglas approached the gate. He was wearing the custom-made suit I'd given him for our anniversary last year, probably the last gift I'd ever give him. Angela clung to his arm, giggling at something he'd said. Then everything happened at once. 2 FBI agents in suits approached from one direction. The trust administrator, Mr. Harrison, emerged from the other side, flanked by airport security. Douglas's face transformed from confusion to shock to rage in seconds. "You don't understand." His voice came clearly through Juliana's audio feed. "My wife gave me permission to sell the property. I have documentation." "Forged documentation," Mr. Harrison interrupted. "The Crawford estate has been in an irrevocable trust for over 20 years. Even if your wife wanted to, she couldn't authorize its sale." I watched Douglas's face pale as he realized his mistake. But instead of surrendering, he shoved Angela toward the agents and bolted. He made it about 10 steps before security tackled him, sending my mother's antique bracelet, which I hadn't even realized was missing, skittering across the airport floor. "Virginia," Juliana's voice was urgent. "Douglas just tried to transfer another $500,000 from your mother's account. If I hadn't frozen it yesterday." My phone buzzed with one final text from Douglas. "You think you're so clever? Check your mother's medical insurance. Oops." My blood ran cold. I immediately called the hospital billing department. Sure enough, Douglas had canceled my mother's insurance policy last week, claiming it was a cost-cutting measure. The surgery she'd just undergone would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. He'd planned it all. Get my mother hospitalized without insurance, drain our accounts, sell the estate, and disappear with the money while I drowned in medical debt. What he hadn't counted on was that I'd already transferred my mother to my own insurance policy 3 months ago, when Juliana first discovered his plans. Sometimes the best trap is the one your enemy never sees coming. As I watched Douglas being handcuffed on Juliana's laptop screen, Agent Martinez rushed into my mother's hospital room. Her face was grave. "Mrs. Crawford, We need to move quickly. Your husband's phone records show he contacted a demolition company yesterday. They're scheduled to start work on the estate tomorrow morning. Something about the buyer wanting to clear the land immediately. My heart stopped. The estate didn't just hold our family memories. It contained evidence of Douglas's other crimes. I'd discovered a hidden safe in his study last week, but hadn't been able to crack it yet. He's trying to destroy the evidence, Juliana said, already dialing her phone. And I bet that safe in his study contains documents from his other victims. There's another problem, Agent Martinez added. Angela's disappeared. She slipped away during the confusion of Douglas's arrest, and she has access to all your banking information. I pulled out my grandmother's diary and removed a small key hidden in its spine. My grandmother didn't just set up the trust, I explained. She installed a state-of-the-art security system throughout the estate. Every room is monitored, every document protected. Angela won't be able to access anything without triggering silent alarms. Right then, Juliana's laptop pinged with an alert. The estate's security cameras showed Angela climbing through a window into Douglas's study. She was heading straight for the safe. Should we send officers? Agent Martinez asked, already reaching for her radio. Wait, I said, watching Angela input the safe's combination. My grandmother also installed a failsafe. Any unauthorized access to the safe? On screen, Angela swung open the safe door triumphantly. Immediately, both the safe and study door locked automatically, trapping her inside. A fine mist sprayed from hidden vents, harmless but containing an invisible UV dye that would mark anyone in the room for weeks. The police can take their time, I smiled. She's not going anywhere. And now she's marked with evidence of attempted theft. My phone rang. It was Mr. Reynolds, the would-be buyer. Mrs. Crawford, I've just learned that Douglas planned to bulldoze the estate and build luxury condos. He showed me forged environmental surveys claiming the historic house was structurally unsound. I've already contacted my bank to stop all payments. Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Though you should know the demolition company he hired. It's another shell corporation. They would have taken your money and disappeared. Agent Martinez ended a call and turned to me. The FBI just found Douglas's laptop. He has detailed files on wealthy families with elderly or ill relatives across 3 states. He was planning to expand his scheme significantly. I looked at my mother, still sleeping peacefully, then back at the security feed showing Angela pounding furiously on the study door. My grandmother always said that greed eventually destroys itself. I don't think Douglas ever understood that the real value of our estate wasn't in its price tag. It was in the protections she built into every brick. Juliana's laptop pinged again. Virginia, she said urgently, you need to see this. Douglas had one more plan in motion, and it's already started. Juliana turned her laptop to show me what looked like transfer confirmations. Douglas set up automatic withdrawals from your mother's retirement accounts. They're scheduled to trigger at midnight. He's trying to empty everything before the banks freeze his assets. I smiled, remembering the day 3 months ago when I'd visited my grandmother's old friend at the trust company. Let him try, I said, pulling up my own phone's banking app. I've already moved everything into new accounts protected by the trust. He's about to transfer money from empty accounts and implicate himself in even more fraud attempts. On the security feed, we watched as police officers entered the study where Angela was trapped. She was still frantically trying to destroy documents from the safe, but her hands were now glowing bright purple under the UV lights. Mrs. Crawford, Agent Martinez said, reviewing the documents we'd found, this evidence isn't just about your estate. Douglas's files detail a scheme targeting dozens of families. We're looking at multiple counts of fraud, theft, and conspiracy. My mother stirred in her hospital bed, her eyes fluttering open. I squeezed her hand gently. Everything's okay, Mom. The estate is safe. Grandmother's plan worked perfectly. Of course it did, she whispered with a faint smile. Your grandmother always said the best trap is the one they walk into themselves. Agent Martinez's phone buzzed. They found Douglas's go bag in his car trunk. It contained passports, currency, and your grandmother's original will. He thought he had the only copy. I opened my grandmother's diary one last time and removed the real original will, safely preserved all these years. No, I said. He only had what we wanted him to find. 2 weeks later, I sat in the courthouse watching Douglas and Angela at their arraignment. Gone were their designer clothes and arrogant smiles, replaced by prison jumpsuits and defeated expressions. The prosecutor read out 37 charges of fraud, conspiracy, and attempted theft. Your Honor, Douglas's lawyer began, my client was simply trying to protect his wife's assets. That's not what the evidence shows, the prosecutor interrupted, holding up a thick folder. We have documented proof of Mr. Crawford targeting multiple families during medical emergencies, attempting to steal their properties through elaborate fraud schemes. The UV-marked documents recovered from his safe detail every crime. I thought about the other victims, 12 families who had almost lost everything to Douglas's schemes. Thanks to the evidence we'd gathered, they would all get justice. The judge set bail at $5 million each, remanding both Douglas and Angela to custody when they couldn't pay. As they were led away, Douglas turned to glare at me. I simply smiled and patted my grandmother's diary. He'd never understood that real wealth isn't about money. It's about family, legacy, and protecting what matters most. Back at the estate, my mother was recovering well in her old room, surrounded by the family photos and heirlooms we'd protected. The garden she loved was blooming again, and the house felt more alive than ever. I sat in my grandmother's favorite chair in the library, feeling her wisdom surround me. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in the fight, it's in preserving what truly matters while letting greed destroy itself.